Hey, what is going on, party people? Bo here with Top Deck Cards and Games, and I'm back with another deck tech for you for Magic. So today we're talking about Standard, and I'm going to be sharing with you guys what I have been playing for Standard to kind of get through this format with all of the Aetherworks stuff going on and whatnot. So I have you guys red-white aggro, but it's like real greedy red-white aggro. So we're gonna go through the list. Basically, what we're doing with this deck is we're splashing blue so we can play Ceremonious Rejection. So I'll break down the deck for you guys so you can see everything that we're playing in here. This is what I play for locals. This deck's really, really good. I like it a whole lot right now. And it has a really good matchup with Marvel just because of the configuration of the cards. So first and foremost, we have the Toolcraft Exemplars, as you could expect in this type of an aggro deck. We're playing another playset of our Thraben Inspectors. We're playing a playset of Selfless Spirits, which is kind of weird to see in this deck for the most part. I feel like a lot of these decks aren't playing that card whatsoever. Playset of Veteran Motorist. That one's kind of expected. We have a set of Smuggler Sculptors, 3 Thalias. That's really the key card in this deck. 2 Depalas, 2 Archangel Avacyn. We have 3 Gideon, a playset of Deccan Stone, just because I hate sideboarding this card. This card's like just always good against Ishkana decks. 3 Stasis Snares, and then for the land base is where we actually get spicy with this. So we are playing a playset of Spire Bluff Canal, 2 Needle Spires, just for more fixing. Playset of Aether Hubs, because it's kind of necessary for us in this deck style. 4 Inspiring Vantage, and what is that? 3, 6, 9 Planes. I think that comes out to 23, if I did the math right. Something like that. Something like that lands, but either way, the configuration for this deck and the way this deck actually ends up panning out for you is that cards like Thalia, whenever you increase the number of that card, you get a whole lot better of a matchup whenever you're playing against stuff like Ishkana and Emrakul. Even if they like marvel into it, they can't really make your turn that bad whenever their stuff's tapped. So that's like a really, really great way to approach it. Otherwise, against like everything else, you still have the most aggressive strategy that you possibly can have, and you're basically trading off for playing the Selfless Spirit as opposed to playing the Scrap Heap Scrounger variant of this deck, which I think the variant's very good, but it's super susceptible to cards like Kozilek's Return, and you have to have something like a Selfless Spirit to really keep your tempo alive whenever you're playing against a bunch of Wrath effects. So I think this deck, in the configuration that it's at, allows you to play a whole lot better against a wider variety of cards rather than just having a kind of straightforward beaten path type of strategy where you're going to do the same stuff every single time. This opens the tree line of possible plays that you can have, and it definitely makes for a much more diverse and robust line of plays that you can make for it, which I think is always great. Just because you're playing like Archangel Avacyn and Selfless Spirit, just those cards alone allow you to do a whole lot in manipulating the board state. Otherwise, it's pretty much like the deck that you would expect to see whenever you're playing aggro. It's playing all the key cards that you need, and ultimately when it comes down to it, when we don't need our like extra Thalia, when we don't need it for our opponent's stuff having to enter the battlefield tapped whenever we're playing against, I don't know, like blue-red control or like Grixis control, stuff like that, we can side it out and we can find other cards that just end up being good in place of that. The third Thalia isn't necessary in the main board, but if you're playing against a bunch of like green-black Delirium, like the big Delirium, not aggro, and if you're playing against a bunch of like Aetherworks Marvel, this is the way to go. This is the configuration for it. So that's the main board. Now we get to take a look at the sideboard, because the sideboard, I bounce around a whole lot with what I play in the sideboard. Basically, as people change what they're playing, as the meta kind of shifts, moves around, and people are playing different stuff, I've changed the sideboard like a lot. But I think this is the most okay sideboard I've had, just because like nobody here plays aggro around our locals, so I'm not playing like bombardments in my sideboard. Otherwise, you should be playing bombardments. But excuse me, the sideboard's still pretty good. Like, we have 2 Tears, 2 Fragmentize, a Sky Sovereign, play set of Ceremonious Rejection, 2 Fumigate, an Eerie Interlude, Gideon, and Chandra. So what you get to do if you're playing in, I don't know, if you're playing in a PPTQ, if you're playing in a GPT, or like a bigger event, maybe like a Grand Prix, basically what I would do is not play the Fumigates, not play the Eerie Interlude, maybe not play the Sky Sovereign. And these 4 are going to just be Galvanic Bombardments for you, just because you need these cards if you're running into a huge, like, open meta and you don't know what you're going to play against, and you're playing in a, like, I don't know, maybe a 60-person event to a 2,000-person event. I would play 4 Galvanic Bombardments here. Otherwise, our meta is much more big on control. It's much bigger on Blue-White Flash, Aetherworks Marvel. So, to kind of break it down for you guys and talk about each card here, Fumigate is probably the most outstanding card here in the sideboard, because you wouldn't expect to see it in an aggro deck, but this card sides in anywhere where we have to clear boards of like Ishkanas, Emrakuls. Otherwise, if we play against Blue-White Flash and we have to clear their board as well, Fumigate is insane, especially because we're playing Selfless Spirit in here and as a 4-of. You're not going to get anybody with Avacyn with the Fumigate. Like, you're never going to have 10 mana to do that, but Selfless Spirit and Fumigate's much more likely, and especially against the Marvel deck, Fumigate ends up being really, really good. The Ceremonious Rejection is almost exclusively for the Aetherworks Marvel deck. You might find some fringe applicability with this card to side it in, but usually I like to not side it in very much. If you know you're playing against like a Dynavolt deck and they're keeping all of their Void Shatters against you or other Devoid cards, then you can keep this card in because it's a colorless spell and you can start countering their stuff, especially the Dynavolt Tower itself. Like, that card sometimes can be problematic if you're behind. So, Ceremonious Rejection, for the most part, is just for the Aetherworks Marvel matchup. Fragmentized, stuff like the Mirror Match, if you run into Blue-White Flash as well, because they'll play Stasis Snares, Copters, stuff like that. Any of the Stasis Snare Copter decks, you want the Fragmentized for that. Generally, it's not as impressive against Aetherworks Marvel. I'd rather just counter the Marvel itself, but sometimes there's some etiquette being on the draw and having the Fragmentized just to be able to blow up their Marvel like after they play it, and maybe they don't have the energy for it. Tears of Alkut, exclusively for Blue-White Flash. You might, again, find some fringe places where you might side it in for other stuff, but you shouldn't for the most part. I can't imagine that you would. Sky Sovereign is for like Blue-White Flash. Otherwise, any creature decks, so you can just start pinging off their stuff with the Enter and with each attack after you get accrued. We have the Eerie Interlude that we can side in against control, any board wipe stuff. It's also very good against Emrakul, because whenever your opponent plays the Emrakul and you don't have a way to stop it, at the end of your opponent's turn, you get to Eerie Interlude, you bounce your board away, and because this card says at the beginning of the next end step, everything comes back, you already passed the end step for that turn, so your cards, your creatures won't come back until the end of the Emrakul turn. They're taking your turn, so at the very end you'll get your creatures back, so they can't like run any of your stuff in or sack away your Selfless Spirits and stuff like that. So that's the reason why. Oh, I guess they can sack your Selfless Spirits at the end after they come back with priority, but either way, they don't get to run your stuff in. That's the most important part about this card. But otherwise, the simplest way to play this card is if you play against like Radiant Flames, Fumigates, stuff like that. Any of those types of cards that your opponent might play against you, the Eerie Interlude is just good. You can side it in against control. But keep in mind, using this against Emrakul for your opponent taking your turn, you just want to do this at the end step, not at like after your opponent resolves Emrakul or something like that. You just want to do it immediately. There are some cases maybe your opponent plays like Kozilek's Return off of the Emrakul and triggers it in the graveyard. Maybe you play the Eerie Interlude to keep your stuff live, but usually it's just like I'll wait till the end of the turn, Eerie Interlude, like bounce everything away. your opponent takes your turn, draws, probably doesn't do anything, and just like passes back. You get all of your stuff. They sack away your spirits if you have any, and just go from there. The only time I think they wouldn't sack your spirits is if you have Avacyn. That's probably it. The Gideon and the Chandra, those cards are like straightforward. You probably already know why they're there. They're just for like any of the slow matchups. So any of the matchups where your opponent brings in like a bunch of creature removal and like board removal, you side these in just so you have a little bit of a countermeasure to their removal, and you keep a card that sticks around for a couple of turns. Excuse me. So that's a deck that I have for you guys for red-white vehicles, or I guess Jeskai vehicles, if anything. The deck is really good. I like it a whole lot. Playing Ceremonious Rejection as a splash is definitely the coolest thing that we can be doing with this deck, and the mana works out. This deck gets better after we get our Aether Revolt cards, just because we have a new land that fixes for us, and we get a couple of other small cool things that we get to play around with. But this is what I'm playing for Standard right now. This is how I'm beating other people and the other meta decks that are around. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button on the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. I'm definitely going to be back with a whole bunch more stuff, and I know DJ is going to be back with more Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, DBZ stuff, and other videos as well. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, peace out.